When I started drinking warm water for my prostate, my friends laughed at me. But when they saw how much I'd improved...
Are you ready, people? No, don't say yeah, say yo-ho! Right about now, ladies and gentlemen, we continue with royalty. And I'd like to bring on stage a man, no stranger. Many, many times, Road March King, Trinidad and Tobago, all over the world. A grand entertainer. Would you please welcome on this pre-Mother's Day show, let's hear it for Austin Lion, better known as Super Blue. Hey. Tonight is Calypso night. Tonight is Calypso night. Raise your hands and tonight is Calypso night. Tonight is Calypso night. So let we jump. We jamming on the roll. We I want everybody say hey, yeah. All the mothers. Meeting people is so wonderful. We can hardly wait to meet someone like you. Baby, just to give happy Mother's Day. Right now, help them keep my love in existence. Hey, raise your hand. What's today's Mother's Day? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Oh yeah! Like for instance, meeting strange faces like you. Oh yeah, where you need assistance urgently. Oh yeah, there is no other proper way. Right now, all you've got to do is smile. Hello. Hello, the Super Blue. Back in my time, we knew him as Blue Boy, Super Blue. Hello to all of you
who are joining us. A Monday evening, the start of a brand new week. Well, a brand new work week, so to speak. Hello, Super Blue, the original Blue Boy. Give us Soca Baptist and Airtel and all those memorable Calypso. Soca Baptist was the original.
Oh, oh God. Watch. All you fellas have to say is, you don't know what it's like. Right? You ready? Fellas. Fellas. Are you ready? Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't. No, they don't. To love you. Wait. Lady, all you could do better than that. Look at them because today's month. Let me see. Fellas. Let me give them one chance. Are you ready? Are you ready? You ready? Let me go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, to the mothers, the way I love you. Whoa, like so much. Like so listening to a prayer meeting, Baptist people preaching, with a leader in front of people shaking. So I tell my partner, come here we get closer, because I tell myself I hear in soca. Going was something to be spiritual. Hey. To me it was more like back and ball for the dancing, some jumping out of time. If you see Baptist from a wine and whoa, like soca Baptist, like soca Baptist, like soca Baptist, whoa, like soca Baptist, like soca Baptist, whoa. Just gonna power take me, cause me to a crazy if. So they embrace my young lifestyle. But I create the problem. I start to fight with them. Though the spirit in me, they have no mercy. When they see a really giving trouble, the preacher laid down on his Bible, oh Lord, yeah, for chapter 2, paper. Someone sing, so carry Baptist me, yeah, singing, whoa, like so Baptist, like so Baptist, like so Baptist, whoa, like so Baptist, like so Baptist, whoa.
Super Blue, Soca Baptist. Good evening to all of you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. It's a Monday evening, and we're starting the work week. This week is budget week because the budget is going to be read on Friday, and then we'll have the budget debate and all that stuff. So as we come to the end of the week, we of course will be talking about the budget. Plenty money, plenty money, plenty money. Good evening to all of you. Welcome to those of you joining us from in Guyana, inside Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. All those of you who are in the Essequibo region, the Venezuelans have done it again, torn apart the Argyle Agreement. We told them that, that thing, anyhow. Anyhow, good evening to all of you who are there in Essequibo. Essequibo, of course, belongs to Guyana, and we will continue to defend our country to the best of our ability. Good evening to all of you who are joining us from outside of the United States outside of Guyana, sorry. Those of you in the United States of America, welcome. It's the last week of the outgoing president, President Biden, and next week on this day, the new president will be sworn in. So in a week's time, the world will change tremendously with the swearing in of President-elect Trump would become president. We are in for a ride. We are in for a ride. Welcome to all of you who are joining us from the United States. Of course, our prayers and concern are with the brothers and sisters, the people in California. And California is burning, LA is burning, area, the wildfires, it's quite a life. I lived in California for 3 years, 3 of the best years of my life. It's a different world. It's a different world altogether out there in California, especially in the Los Angeles area. Let's hope that they're able to control those fires, bring them under control. Already, lives have been lost, property has been lost, lives have been lost. Oh boy. Welcome to all of you on the West Coast. Those of you who are in Arizona and some of the states surrounding California. Welcome. Of course, the bulk of you are joining us from the East Coast, New York, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, Connecticut, Virginia, Maryland, Washington, D.C., as I said, that span. Some of you do join us from the Midwest in Illinois, of course, Chicago. Welcome to all of you. And those of you who join us from Canada, always a pleasure to have you on. Canada, lots of our people are there, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Of course, those of us in the wider Caribbean, stretching from Jamaica and the Bahamas, and in the north, Cuba, in the north, right down to Trinidad and Grenada, in the south, of course, Guyana. And then if we shift a little bit more on the mainland itself, of course, there is Guyana, and there is Suriname and the French Guyana. And then on the Central America, we have our sisters and brothers in Belize. Our Caribbean brothers and sisters. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Monday evening. And it's never a dull day in politics in Guyana. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you. The month is almost halfway done. You realize it? It's the 13th of January 13th of January, month is gone, 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 gone. It looks as though this year is going to gallop. Of course, this election year in Guyana is going to be a very, very busy year in Guyana this coming year. It's going to be a tough year for our country because we are entering election. Elections are never easy in Guyana and will never be easy in a place like Guyana. In a place like Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. It's budget. It's budget week. And as you know, budget is about what you intend to spend and what you expect to bring in. What you intend to spend and what you intend to bring in. So you, our people, especially women, know a lot about budgeting. And budget is, of course, is very important. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to my is out there in Europe. Good evening. The Sauls, of course, are a fixture of a family in West Coast Babies, particularly Belladrum, El Dorado area. Welcome to all you wonderful people in West Babies. Still my favorite part of Guyana. Welcome to Politics 101. It's countdown time. Countdown to election. It's going to be a big year. You all notice that finally Mr. Calvin Brutus has decided to speak. He's filed a lawsuit, as you know, claiming discrimination and exposing what is apparently now known as the PPP's diversity policy. That they had gone to the police and they ordered the police force should look like Guyana, what they call the diversity program. And it's good to know that the PPP is thinking about diversity. It's very good to know that the PPP is thinking about diversity. But as we all suspect, something was happening in that police force. So, you know, the PPP calling for diversity in the police force, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. In fact, I do support diversity in the police force. But apparently, what the PPP is talking about is not diversity in the force, but diversity in the leadership of the force. And what they mean by diversity in the leadership of the force is take over the leadership of the force and to make the leadership of the force less black. When the PPP came back to office in 1992, one of the first things the Dr. Jagan government did was to try to get East Indians to join the police force. Some of them did, a few, but the East Indians did not pay attention to the government. They had no interest in joining the police force and the army. No interest. All right? And that is understandable in a society like ours. Now, the PPP, you know, spent 3-4 decades demonizing the police force and the army as bastions of African bullyism. The average Indian, when he or she looked at the army, looked at the police, what you saw is an institution that was anti-Indian, an institution or institutions that were going to beat up Indian people. So if you socialize people to believe that here is an institution that is anti-Indian by nature, that Indian people will get no justice in an organization like that, an institution, why do you expect them to want to join it? The fact that Indian people don't want to join the army, sometimes we hear the explanation, Indian people don't want to go in the army and the police because they don't pay them plenty money. That is true. But I do not think that that is the overriding reason that Indian people don't want to go in the army and the police. The overriding reason is that these institutions have been explained to them and described to them over and over as anti-Indian institutions. That if you go in the police, you're going to police force, army, you send your women them, they're going to be raped. Don't go there. That, you know, the police and the army are places where Black people bully you. And over a time, people come to believe that, and so they're not going to join the army and the police. And so when the PPP came to power in 1992 and tried to get them to go in the army, they didn't go. They didn't go. And remember, that has always been an issue for the PPP, going right back to the 1950s and 60s, when Dr. Jagan said that the PPP was in office but not in power. And he saw the military and police as part of this force against the PPP. And since back then, they had called for a diversifying of the army and the police. But like I said, the Indian people, Indian men, didn't pay them any mind. And so what Jack Dio did over time was to come to the understanding that Indian people are not going to join the army and police en masse. And so what they set out to do to control the army and the police is, first of all, co-opt some willing Africans at the top. That is, identify some Africans at the top who you're able to cultivate and buy over and bribe and bring them over on your side. And then to bring in Indians at the top of the army and the police. That when there are openings at the top, you slug them with East Indians. So now you have, I think at the last count, right, of the 10 commanders, 6 of them are Indians. In a police force in which Indians are less than 10%, in a police force where Indians are less than 10%, the leadership at the level of the commanders is 60% Indian. And so the PPP over time have figured out how to control the army and the police. And that is to co-opt some of the African leadership and then promote East Indians in the police to these leadership positions. So you have a police force now that is predominantly African, but that the leadership of the police force is a majority Indian, and even the Africans who are in the leadership are co-opted to the PPP. So that is what. So when Mr. Brutus tells us about this diversity, it is not about diversity of the police force, diversity of the leadership. And Mr. Brutus has now gone to court and he's claiming discrimination against Africans. Well, better late than never. Better late than never. And it's good that it comes from somebody like Brutus. Now, I don't know what Brutus' stance was, whether Brutus was one of those who allowed himself to be co-opted. And that now that he's getting squeezed, he's speaking out. Maybe that is the case. But this is the problem. This is one of the problems that is developed in Guyana, period. And that is this whole notion of co-optation. The PPP has moved aggressively to co-opt the leadership of institutions that are dominated by African people. Police, the army, the public service. The leadership of those institutions are predominantly Indian, and the institutions themselves have a majority of Africans. And that is the state of things. And in order to do so, you had, like I said, to co-opt some Africans at the top. And the PPP aggressively went after it. And some innocent Guyanese call it, trying to win over Africans. The PPP is not trying to win over Africans. It is not interested in winning over Africans. It knows it is not going to be able to win over Africans en masse. It knows that. And so what the PPP has been doing all the time is trying to take over the leadership of institutions in the society that are predominantly African. And when you do that, what you do is that you change the balance of power in the state and the society. Let's take a place like Barbados. About 10 to 15% of the Barbadian population is white. Barbados has been the only settler colony in the Caribbean, meaning the only colony where white people actually settled. In all of the other colonies in the English-speaking Caribbean, white people didn't settle. They were what you call absentee landowners. Barbados is the one place in which they settled. And these were mostly poor whites who came to Barbados. Some came to serve their sentences. Some came because they were down and out and they came to look for their fortune. But they migrated to Barbados. So that in Barbados, those poor whites, the derogatory name is red legs. In America, they call them rednecks. And these are poor whites who came to Barbados. Over time, these poor whites became rich whites because they were given preference in the commercial sector. And so what you find in today's Barbados is the whites control, for the most part, the economic sector, the commercial sectors. They control that. And there was an understanding, an unwritten understanding, that blacks were going to control the politics and the whites were going to control the economics. And that was an unwritten, and to this day, I think it is an unwritten understanding in Barbados. Of course, there are blacks now who are doing well and want to get into the commercial sector. And that is proving a challenge in Barbados because of this unwritten understanding. In Guyana, there was also an unwritten understanding that Indian Guyanese control the agricultural sector, and along with Portuguese, the commercial sector, and that Africans control the public service, the police, the army, and the other sectors such as pork knocking and so on in the old days, the blacks. So there was an understanding, unwritten understanding between the two groups. I myself, at one point, more than a decade ago, when they called and said, let us diversify the army. And I said, well, let's diversify the economy too. Let's diversify the economic sector. Let's diversify agriculture. Let's diversify the commercial sector. Let's diversify the wealth. Because in societies like ours, the balance of power between two groups of about equal numbers really lies in areas of the economy. When Africans had political power, the Indians could use their power in the commercial sector and in the agricultural sector to manage the government. And the understanding was when the Indian government is in power, the Africans will use their power in the army and the police and the public service to manage the PPP government. And it was that unwritten understanding that held the country together, because both sides could inflict damage on the other side when it's in power. I have to say that the PPP has changed that. It has changed that balance of power. The PPP today, of course, control the political arm of the government, meaning the cabinet, and they control the parliament, and by extension, they exercise influence over the courts. So they control the political power. They've spent the last 30-odd years consolidating the control of the commercial sector, which was there all the time. But they've now added new elements to the commercial sector. There were areas of commerce that Africans control that today Indians are controlling. We can no longer talk about bushwalk and Tabo black people. East Indians and others are knowing that. And so for the most part, East Indians control the commercial sector. They control the politics, they control the commercial sector. The one area of power in the society that was left was the military power. And as I explained, they were not able to get Indians to go into the army and the police. But what they've done is capture the leadership of those institutions. And they've done so, as I explained, by co-opting the Africans at the top and promoting Indians to the top. So they now control the military, they control the commercial sector, and they control the politics. There's no balance of power anymore in Guyana as we speak. And I want to say that that is a very, very important development. It's important if you look at it from all sides. I think one side we don't look at it from is when people ask, why are Black people taking so much nonsense in Guyana? Why? And the answer is very clear. Human beings, until they get to that point where they decide enough is enough. What Bob Marley said, freedom come one day. I stepped out of dung and I saw Sheriff John Brown and I shot him before he shot me. Until human beings get to that point where they can't take it anymore, their actions are usually determined by those who hold force in the society. Whether it was on the slave plantation, on the indentured, during the period of indentureship, resistance has always been done within the context of the force that is exercised by the state. And so when we ask that question all the time, it's a legitimate question to ask, but we have to take into consideration the extent to which the PPP has been successful in capturing the institutions of force and coercion in the society. And so what the PPP has done over time has had an impact on Black people's resistance, Black people's protest. It is not that Black people have become cowards. No, I do not think they've become cowards. I think they and their leaders are grappling with the change that has occurred over the last 30 years in terms of the institutions of force in the society. And so we have a society now in which those overarching institutions are in the control of the ruling party. That's a fact. We have to come to grips with that. And so the importance of Brutus' thing, in which he's saying, look, these leaders came and they told us that we've got to diversify. The police force and army must look like Guyana. Now, they know fully well that the police force and army will not look like Guyana. In 2025, the police force and the army do not look like Guyana. The police force and the army are still predominantly Black, predominantly African Guyanese. But the leadership of the police force is what has been diversified. But it has not been diversified in a democratic way. It has been diversified in an undemocratic way, in the sense that we have moved from control by Africans to now control by Indians. And this is what Calvin Brutus is bringing to our attention. And he's saying that it's discrimination. He's now a victim of it. He's gone to the court. But you see, this is what people like us have been saying all these decades. We've been saying that there is an ethnic capturing of the institutions, and there's a deliberate move on the part of this government to weaken African control of the society. Mr. Brutus is now bringing that out and is now telling us that, yes, Dr. Hines, you and Vincent Alexander and the others and Takuma Ogunse and others, you all have not been wrong. Were you all flies on the wall? This is actually what happened. When we talked about an apartheid Guyana, we were not wrong. We were not wrong. You know, interestingly, in 2004, I think, President Carter wrote a book, on the Middle East, in which he referred to the Israeli government as an apartheid government. Oh my goodness, they came down on him in America. A lot of people forget that. Nancy Pelosi said he doesn't speak for the Democratic Party. Howard Dean, who was then the chairman of the DNC, came out lashing the Democratic Party through President Carter under the bus because he said that the Israeli state was an apartheid state. Today, all the human rights organizations, some in Israel, are saying that what is going on there in the Middle East, what is going on there in Gaza, is nothing short of apartheid. We buried Carter this week, sorry. But he was thrown under the bus in 2004. The America officialdom, including his own party, they disowned him. Come to our Guyana. 4 years ago, when we said that what we have is an emerging apartheid state, some people, including some Black leaders, disassociated themselves from us. Disassociated themselves. Where is apartheid in Guyana? We don't see anything that happened in South Africa happening here in Guyana. Now we know that this government is being engaged in apartheid under the name of diversity. It took all that they did to Mr. Brutus for somebody to come out and to say what we have known all the time. Diversity means taking control of the society. And what continues to frustrate somebody like myself is not that there are people who side with the PPP and whatever else, that's their right. But it is that they deny, they pretend as though Guyana is a normal place. And in fact, those of us who are pushing back against the downsizing of African power in the society, we are the ones who are called racist. We are the ones. And the party and government that is engaged in that kind of behavior, they're given a pass. Some of them are criticized for other things. But when it comes to the question of race, they stay very far. Because a lot of people don't mind African people being put in their place. I am sure that there are those who still exist in our society. People who feel that African people do not deserve the real power. There are still people like that who remain in our society. And so what Brutus has brought out is important in that regard, in that it is now being made known what we always suspect was happening. Now, once you begin to do that in a society like ours, you are creating problems down the road. I've said over and over again that Black people, African Guyanese, are being put in a hell of a position. Look at who the people who are fighting up and fighting down and fainting and so on in the lines for the cash grant. You would think that it's an African country. It was mostly African people. Although the cash grants are given to all ethnic groups, including East Indians. The people who have been fighting down and carrying on the most for it is Black people. What it shows is the extent to which our people have been pauperized, deliberately so. And when you're pauperized, you welcome anything that comes. I would have difficulty, great difficulty, in going to any Indian community and have Indian people parading up in front of me. Even if I were president, I would have great difficulty as an African to go to Indian community and have Indian people parading in front of me like, like subjects. And you look at what Irfan Ali is doing. He's making these whistle stops in communities. There on the East Coast this past week, went to places like Melanie and Numprel and Strathspey and Buxton and so forth. And the Lord lands and he talks for a couple of minutes, and then they line up a few people to say, we need this for our village, we need that for our village, we need that for our village store, and so on. And then he leaves. And I am telling you, those people are enjoying themselves seeing Black people line up and parade in front of them like that. But that's where the Black community has been pushed. I don't think it's going to be a permanent state. I think Black people themselves are going to pull out of that. It's not a permanent state. They've become the victims of the logic of party politics. Because the leadership that has been developed in the Black community is a political party leadership. It's not like in the United States where you have Black Americans. They belong to the Democratic Party. Well, they vote for the most part for the Democratic Party. But they have interest groups, Black interest groups, African American interest groups. They have the NAACP, they have Black Lives Matter. You have Black organizations that every day fight for Black issues. So that even when the Democratic Party does not fight Black issues, and they don't, you have Black civil rights organizations that fight Black issues. In Guyana, we don't have Black civil society organizations that fight Black issues. We have lots of Black organizations. IPADG's membership is over 75. So we have a lot of Black organizations. But for the most part, those organizations are cultural in nature. They look after culture and so forth. They're not political. They're cultural. And so when African people are in political trouble, they have to rely on the political party because that is the only political leadership. And the political party is a different animal from a cultural organization. Political parties are in the business of running people for office, competing for office, winning office, and exercising governmental power. And although they may have strong views on issues that affect their support base, they are less likely to come out and to fight those issues from a racial standpoint. A lot of times we call on the PNC as the party that receives the overwhelming majority of the Black vote to fight Black issues. And sometimes some of us feel that they could at least fight some more But the fact of the matter is that the political party is less likely to take on those racial issues in a frontal way. And so where the people do not have their own cultural and political organizations outside of the political party, they're in trouble. And that was the case with Black people. The PPP does not have to overtly fight Indian issues. They do. They do. They do. And they get away with it. But even if the PPP doesn't fight, the Indian community has a whole bunch of organizations which are cultural, just like the Black people organization, the Maha Sabha, and all the Indian organizations, Muslim organizations, Hindu organizations. Then you have the secular organization like the Indian Arrival Committee, etc., etc. You have all of these organizations. And they're cultural organizations, but they have a political agenda. And so they fight Indian issues such as, Indian Arrival and Indian Arrival. They don't have to depend on the PPP because there is alternative leadership in the Indian community that fight Indian issues. Amerindians, same thing. The Amerindians do not necessarily have to depend on an Amerindian party. They're Amerindian civil society organizations, and they fight Amerindian issues, Amerindian land issues, carbon, credit for Amerindians. African organizations are the ones that are not political. And they tell you plain, and you can't vex with them. I belong to some of them. And they take their culture very seriously. And they stay away from politics. This is not the case with East Indian organizations. Look at the Private Sector Commission. Private sector is basically an Indian-dominated organization. They take positions on the economy. They take positions on politics. They just met with the vice president to say they are concerned that in this election year there will be instability. Where is the African equivalent of the Private Sector Commission? African business people are in the minority. They're not going to want to form such an organization. And even if they did, they will keep a low profile. They will keep a low profile. So the diversity that the PPP has been talking about over time has now come full circle. They've used that whole notion of diversity to really perpetuate hegemony. And that is the reality of what you have in the society. So, in many respects, Black people seem helpless. And we now depend on one way out, and that is election. And then when we get into that arena, we notice that even there, the odds are stacked against us. So Guyana today is a study of how the leadership of one ethnic group was able to use its hold on state power to break the old balance of power and to introduce a new balance of power in the society. That's a reality. And it has an impact in almost anything that we do. Our trade unions, the unions that represent African Guyanese workers, are the weakest. Look at GAU. Look at what GAU is able to do every day for its workers and NASI. And look at what the PSU or the GTU are able to do for their members or not able to do. I mean, the GTU really has fought like a tiger in the last couple of years, but they're alone. They've emasculated the black-led trade unions. Look at the black church. There's no longer any liberation theology. There's no longer theology of justice versus injustice. There's no longer theology that witness to the poor and the powerless. The black church has either gone silent, gone apolitical, or some of them are colluding with the political state. And that was an area that black people could look to for some kind of inspirational leadership. Gone. No radical black church anymore. No radical black trade unionism anymore. No radical political organization outside of political parties anymore. The age of ASCRA is gone. ASCRA was a cultural organization, but it was a political cultural organization. A cultural organization that took on political issues on behalf of black people. So, sisters and brothers, we have seen how the PPP has used the power of the state to transform the society in front of our eyes, our very eyes. And this is what Brutus, is bringing out. He's saying that this thing, doctrines that you all are talking about, is not willy-nilly. This thing is actually true. And it was systematically done. And I'm telling you, there are so many more Brutuses. By the time they all come out, it may be too late. But, you know, they say it's better late than never in politics. I mean, look what they had to do to Brutus for him to come out and let the country know what they have been doing. And so that is something that we cannot ignore. We cannot ignore a multi-ethnic society in which you have two major groups, almost the same size, but one is dominating the other. It's not going to last forever. It's having the desired effect now from a PPP standpoint, in the sense that they're watching as black people are with their backs against the wall. The question is, what do we do as a people? What do we do as a people, as a black people, as an African people? If we are being oppressed because of our race, then we have to fight back because of our race. I think it's Walter Rodney said, if someone uses my race to dehumanize me. I have to use my race to humanize myself. And I think that's a challenge that's facing Black people. There are other solutions. There's the political solution. That is to take power, take governmental power. But that ought not to be the only solution. Black people have to come to grips with the fact that you are being targeted principally because of your race. And this is not just bad things, even some things that look good, it's done racially. It's budget week. And the budget is going to be out in a couple of days, and some of us will be looking to see the distribution of the resources, how much is being allocated where. Because what is allocated for teachers, it's not just teachers, it's African people, because the majority of teachers are Africans. What is allocated for sugar workers? It's not just sugar workers, it's East Indians, because they're the majority of sugar workers. The tax breaks and all the other goodies for the business sector. It's not just the business sector. It's for East Indians and Portuguese who make up the majority of that sector. And so we in Guyana have to see not just the text, but the subtext. And our analysis must take into consideration both text and subtext. As I said, if so much money is being put in the agricultural sector, on the one hand, that's good. It's good because agriculture is a very important sector in our economy. But then that money that is put there for agriculture has to be balanced with how much money you put for education, like we said. The government has spent a lot of money on infrastructure. Well, we have gone over that over and over again. The beneficiaries of the infrastructural program are the contractors. And who are the contractors? Who are the major contractors? They're mostly East Indians. African people are a tiny minority. So the budget is a good place to funnel money to the ethnic communities, because that's the nature of our society. Monies to the regions. We saw in previous budgets where regions that are won by the PPP, regions where East Indians predominate, government subvention, government expenditure in those regions far outstrip the regions which they do not control. A region like Region 4, which is the largest region, and one would imagine that government expenditure would be the highest in a region like that. Oh, no, sir. No, sir. No. And so, because we are timid about confronting race. And we always find an excuse, especially Africans. I think Indians have a clever way of dealing with race. On the surface, they will dismiss race. But once they get out of the limelight and the public glare, they are very racially conscious. I would say East Indians are much more racially conscious than Africans. And it's not a bad thing to be racially conscious. If you're racially conscious, you see when somebody is discriminating against you because of your race. If you're not racially conscious, then you will notice it. You wouldn't notice it. And so the problem is that the generations of Africans, especially younger generations of Africans, they recognize that there is a racial problem. It's not that they don't recognize that there is a racial problem. So don't get me wrong when I say they're not racially conscious, they're not conscious that race is an issue. They are. They are. But they're prepared to deal with it by not dealing with it. At the 2020 election, both sides said that the election was being stolen from them. Who came onto the streets? Indian people. Lusiknan and Bushlat, Bat, beat police. And that thing was silence. The media don't talk about it. Indian leadership don't talk about it. Even Black people don't talk about it. It wasn't Black people who was licking down the place in 2020. It was Indian people who were licking down and blocking up and beating up. But you listen to Indian scholars, Indian leaders, they don't mention it. It never happened. And insofar as it happened, it was a little thing. But when they hold to talk, they will talk about Golden Grove people marching and blocking up people's stall and beating them at Monrepo. That will not go away. Indian people will not allow you to think. But when Indian people are beating Black police for the world to see, stoning children, Black children in buses for the world to see, somewhere the other it has disappeared. It never happened. Even Black people don't talk about it. Black leaders, Black politicians don't talk about it. Granger, I think, speaks about it. I think Granger was very hurt by that. Very hurt. Because I gather that he gave the command that it was during election time that the police shouldn't walk around with weapons, which was a very honorable thing. But having made that, they call him, what they call him? Something sanctimonious gangster. If he was a gangster, 2020 would have been different. If Granger was a gangster, sanctimonious or non-sanctimonious, 2020 was a different. Granger is not a gangster. Granger may be other things, but he's not a gangster. And they know that. They know that. The 2020 election, Black people were beaten by Indians, including Black police. In 1997, around that election, Indian people were beaten by Africans. And the Indian leaders went on overkill with that. But those same Indian leaders are ignoring that in the 2020 election, Indian people beat Black people. And any society that continues to play around with these issues is going to be in a lot of trouble. Just as I can sit here and say, in 1997, African people were the aggressors in the violence after that election. There were other stories. There are stories of African people coming to the rescue of Indian people who were being beaten, giving rescue to them, and so on and so forth. There are all set of other stories. The violence that was described by some of the Indian activists, it was blown out of proportion. There are all of that. But the fact of the matter is that the violence in 1997, the aggressors were mostly Africans. And the violence in 2020 was solely violence by Indians against Africans. When we can begin to talk like that, then we are talking multiracialism. Then we are talking multiracialism. When we are able to face the facts. It is no accident that after the 2020 election, there were all kinds of strident calls to poison Black people, poison the food you sell them, poison their water, hungry belly this, hungry. There's no accident that emerged after 2020. Because there was a sense of Indian triumphalism. And as someone who fought in my own Black community as a young man, trying to talk them out of anti-Indian violence, trying to get them to be in solidarity with their Indian and Amerindian worker brother and sister, trying to point them to the fact that their own party was not behaving properly. To now watch the shoe on the other foot, where African people are the victims of violence, where Indian people are the aggressors, and to see Indian comrades saying nothing, pretending it never happened. God bless a lot of the Indian comrades who are fighting the good fight against Exxon. Who are fighting the good fight against Exxon. Fighting for better contract. It's good. But where are those same voices fighting against police brutality of Africans? Fighting against the dispossession of lands, African lands. Where are those voices? Even if you put 95% of your voice on Exxon, what 5% to talk about anti-African violence? I mean, gosh, the police admit that they killed that boy, Quindan Bacchus. The court awarded them 24 million, awarding $24 million, his family. And there are those in the PPP who wanted to deny that. Eventually, they changed their mind. But that doesn't assault. It doesn't assault the thinking of a lot of the Indian leadership. It's like nothing. Nothing. Where the state was attempting to deny the family of somebody they admit that they killed. It doesn't anger our Indian leadership. And I'm not talking about the PPP leadership. I'm talking about those not in the PPP. They're not angered by it. And African leadership find themselves compromised. Because remember, they're looking for votes. They look at that voting thing and they say, boy, for us to get that 33 seats, here is what we got to do. And in order to do that, it means that we can't fight no African fight. So Indian leaders are not going to defend Black people, in particular because Black leaders, for the most part, are not defending Black people. In fact, you listen to some commentators, they dismiss people like me. We will not get one vote. Because in their head, you're all fighting for Black people, but Black people are interested in that fight. And they will never reward you, David Hines, with any vote for fighting for them. They're Indian leaders and Black leaders. Black civil society were saying that. In the sense, what they've done is that they have dismissed Black people as compromised. Ralph from Quran column this weekend concluded that there is not going to be any opposition coalition at the election. His argument is that the PNC will get 40% of the vote as it normally gets. The AFC is not going to tie bundle with the PNC anymore. But even though the AFC is not tying bundle with the PNC anymore, that is not going to bring any Indian votes to the AFC, because Nigel Hughes is representing the people who quote unquote rigged the election. So his conclusion is that there's going to be no coalition. Of course, the WPA doesn't count in their estimation, because Black people don't listen to people who telling them to fight for their Black self. The situation with Black people is not easy. It's not easy. We fight down, we fight each other. We look at the situation with Brother Thing there in Linden. Apostle London, he's a businessman, shake the president hand, and an avalanche has come down on him. I mean, I love Apostle. And I don't think Apostle, acted out of hand by shaking Irfan Ali hand. I don't think he acted badly. But the fact that he is surprised that Black people spring on him like a tiger cat is what is the issue. The issue is not that he shake Ali hand. I don't think he did anything wrong there. But if he had asked me before, Dr. Hines, if I shake Ali hand, you think Black people go mind? I would tell you, bye. They're mine, they're going to jump on you. I would have told him that. They're not able to jump on the enemy because the enemy has the pow. They have the power. They have the guns. So they're going to jump on their own. Understandably so. So I am not surprised that they jump on Apostle London. You see, we have to study our society a little bit deeper. And Apostle London is a very thoughtful man. So I'm not saying that he hasn't studied the society. But even for those of us who study the society, sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes we're surprised. Look at the blows that they're giving, what did my name? James Bond. Again, only the other day, James was in Congress Place, pledging his loyalty to the PPP, to the PNC, and Norton. Just a couple of weeks, he was fighting Freddie Kissoon on his show, defending the PNC. And then last week, he said, "I'm supporting Ali for third term." And all a second term, all hell break loose. Black people turn on him. Again, James Bond has a right to support who you want to support for whatever second term, third term. That is his right. But if James had asked me, Dr. Hines, you think black people would care whether I support Ali and thing? I would have said, bye, they're going to kill you. Meaning, I don't mean physically kill him, but the kind of blows that he's getting. Because our people are not able to beat up as they would want to the other side. The minute we slip, they beat the hell out of us. And that's what's happening, unfortunately, to Apostle London, because I don't think he deserves it. I don't think he deserves it. Maybe James more deserve what is coming his way. I see somebody say James is a pragmatist. The thing about a pragmatist in a heated society like ours is that then got Indian pragmatists. All the pragmatists are black people pragmatists. So we are really in a terrible state, the black community. Not impossible. We have to look and see the changes that are occurring, and we have to take into consider the changes that have occurred. I do not believe that there's any critical mass of black people going to go and vote for PPP. I don't believe that. I think the vote is still going to be along racial lines. I think it will still be along racial lines. But I think African people will find excuses not to do certain things. And so that makes our job on this side very, very, very important. We have to talk to black people as I am talking tonight. We have to find some way to do it. It is not that black people don't know what is happening to them. They know. But if they're the masses and they feel helpless, then they will act as though they're helpless. Look at when the teachers came on the road, how much they lift the spirits of black people. For one brief moment. But look what happened. Their leadership, the leadership of the union, or part of the leadership of the union, basically sell them down the drain. It is that kind of thing that black people lash out at. I listen to Pastor Apostle London, and I take his argument. You know, you're a businessman, and the president come there, and he come to you and shake your hand. You shake his hand as a business person. But then once you move away from that arena, there's no shake hand. I understand Apostle position. But I am saying to Apostle, if you're surprised, then you took your eye a little bit off the ball. I'm not surprised. I am not surprised. I'm not surprised. In the final analysis, this thing affects the entire country. Because if you have half of the country, one of the major ethnic groups in the country, feeling that sense of unease, feeling that sense of siege, it is not good for the country in total. It is not good. So, sisters and brothers, here we are on this Monday evening, engaging again in a frank discussion about the state of affairs in Guyana, and saying some things that others are reluctant to see. I don't know it any other way. I do not know it any other way. You deal with racial problems by confronting them, and being open about them. And people like myself become very dangerous to those who would like to engage in racial and racist policy without being detected. I don't mind every time they go to do something, they say, boy, I wonder what David Hines is going to say. He's going to say we're racist. Yes, I want them to always say that when they are going to do. It won't stop them. But at least they know that there's some of us who going to call the shit out for what it is. And as I said, Black people got to make up their mind. And make up your own mind. It's either you all want to defy the laws of that guide human action and prove that you all are an exception to that, or you want to prove that you are human beings who act like human beings. And I believe that we all are human beings and will act like human beings and must act like human beings. We have a big lineup this week. We have Dr. Jeffrey is going to be here tomorrow night. I think GHK Lal is going to be here this week. Vincent Alexander is going to be here this week. So it's quite a busy week, But we've got to keep the fire burning. We've got to keep the fire burning so as to hold Guyana together. Guyana is not going to survive as a one-race country. Well, all of us are there. It's not going to survive. That's out of the question. All right? The PPP can take all the power it wants. In fact, the more power it takes, the more it is making it very difficult to hold the country together. So my worry is not that Black people somehow or the other are going to lie down and just dead. That is not going to happen. The point is the price that the country will have to pay. And that is why I'm thinking the PPP is cruel, because they know that if they continue down this road, the price all of us will pay. including Indian people, Black people, Amerindian people. All peoples are going to pay a price for what the PPP is attempting to do. And the PPP knows that, but yet it is continuing to do so, which means that it is playing a game, it's gambling with the safety and the security of Guyanese people, gambling it away. I don't know, I can never be part of a government that's going to take them gamble. You think anybody can watch me cross a table and tell me, David, we can use the power of government to control Indian people? I'll tell them, no, because it can't happen. And I am not prepared to take that risk. You're going to get through for a couple of mornings. But it's not sustainable. What the PPP is doing is not sustainable. It may look as though they get Black people where they want them for a minute, but that is not sustainable. And the PPP leadership knows that. But they're gambling. They're gambling. And every time Black people do normal things, I watch young people, they line up, they're very respectful to the president. They ask for things for the village, including my own village. They want sewing machine, they want this, they want that. They're doing what people should do in a democratic society. But that is not seen as making representation for themselves. It is seen as them going over to the PPP. The PPP is going to say, look, when Ali went to Buxton, look at all those Black people, all those Buxtonians who came up and asked the president for this and asked the president for that. All those people are doing is what they should do when any government is in power. And they should do more of it when their government is in power. They shouldn't sit down and leave it. They should come up whenever the leaders come and tell them what you need in your community. But unfortunately, the PPP is going to use those images at election to show that Black people in Buxton support them or Black people in Melanie support them. Unfortunately. Does that mean that our people should not make representation on their own behalf? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that we have to make them conscious of how their actions would be seen and interpreted. And the PPP give those people that $100,000, put it in their bank account, put it in places, you know, they go normal places and collect that thing. It would have passed without a meow. But they want the licking down on the road. They want the shoving down and the behaving bad on the road and the fainting and those old people think they want it because they're going to use it at election time to say, look, we give $100,000 and look how Black people came out in their numbers for it. Thank God for the PPP. They're going to use that. And of course, all your registration story that you all give them, you know, that's sitting duck right there. They're going to use that for voter impersonation. They've transformed our country into a difficult place, a very difficult place. But we are hoping that we are going to be able to overcome this little difficulty and know that the work ahead is very, very important work. And you all, the ordinary people, those of you who feel it every day, you all have to Commit yourself. Commit yourself to ensuring that your humanity is respected. It's easy for me to sit up here and others like myself who don't need $100,000 from the government. But the vast majority of our people of all races, that $100,000 will buy something that they could not normally buy. They need that $100,000. So it's easy for me to sit up here and to lambaste people and people shouldn't this and shouldn't that. That is why I don't do it. I try to understand where people are and try to look at the big picture and to try to change that. If there is any guarantee that the army and police is now going to beat up on people on the road, African people will ignore their political leaders and come out on the road and so on. That's how normal human beings operate. That's how normal human beings operate. And it is that we have to change to release the positive energies of our people. Thank you all very much for staying with me. Another evening, another night, another afternoon. And we're going to continue to rock the boat, because that's the only way we're going to be able to alert those on the boat that the seas are rough, the rivers are rough, and the boat is going to rock. Ultimately, we have to calm the seas and calm the river. Sometimes we try to calm the boat and not realize the boat cannot be calmed if the rivers and the seas are not calm. See you all tomorrow.